Okay, I think Mexico is kind of at a turning point right now when it comes to freedom of speech and more generally human rights. It is at a turning point because the country is moving into a new political era. There is a new government, a new administration coming into power. It is at a turning point because the commitment that had been made to tackle freedom of expression violation and in particular violence against journalists, those commitments may not have or have not delivered the expected result. We have seen a number of steps taken by the current administration, such as the constitutional reform for the federalization of the crimes against journalists, the protection mechanisms put in place, the special fiscalia responsible for crimes against journalists. All of these were important steps. On the other hand, those steps have not delivered result. And journalists not only continue to be the victim of violence, that's a big problem, of course, but from my standpoint, the biggest problem is the fact that these violence remain without accountability. In other words, journalists are killed, journalists are disappeared, journalists are attacked, and none of the perpetrators are ever brought to justice. So there is an incredible climate of impunity around violence against journalists, which I think is really, unfortunately, is going to be the legacy of the last decade. The degree of impunity has not been tackled. And that to me is probably the most, not unforgiving, but while you can understand that some violence are difficult to address, particularly violence by drug cartels, that does not mean that there should be no steps taken or proper steps taken towards bringing some sense of justice. And unfortunately, all of the cases that Article 19 Mexico has identified, all of those that we have followed up very closely, demonstrate that investigation is either completely failing or is not even trying to produce some kind of result. That is, the impunity is really the scar, a scar on Mexico, nationally and internationally. I do not think that the cartels are responsible for impunity. I don't think the cartels are responsible for the lack of investigation and for the lack of justice. To the extent that it's a systemic problem that characterizes all kinds of crimes, not only crimes related to the cartels, we need to conclude that the responsibility for the impunity resides squarely in the hands of the government and in the hands of the institution responsible for handling all forms of crimes. When it comes to journalists, who, by the way, I do not mean to treat journalists as a special category of people who need to be more protected than others. It just happened that these are the people that we at Article 19 focus our effort on, and in particular, these are the people for whom we have good data, for whom we have monitored, recorded, and so on, and therefore it is an important source of information about the systemic problems facing the police and justice system. in the cases that we have looked at very carefully, the cases that we were able to look at carefully, because many of them we can't access the files, what we do find is that the investigation is often conducted in a very ad hoc basis, that there are many essential steps that appear not to be taken. I was in Ciudad Juarez at the beginning of the week. I spoke with colleagues of journalists who had been killed, and they told me that the witnesses to the killing had not been even interviewed as part of the investigation. They also told me, and they had the exact quote from the prosecutor's office, they told me that the files on that particular killing, the one of Juan Carlos from Ciudad Juarez, the photograph, the killing in that case, the investigation for that killing that occurred 2 years ago had not changed. There had been no progress made whatsoever for the last 12 months. When we consider another killing, that of Armando, the other journalist from El Diario, again, the investigation has gone nowhere. There has been, no one has been brought to justice, some 4 years after the killings, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere at that stage, according to the information we have received. So the evidence that we are able to collect demonstrate that there is a systemic problem, an inability to investigate, and the people that should be investigating, such as the Special Prosecutor's Office, have failed to investigate so far. They were established in order to balance what was not being done by other authorities. That Special Prosecutor's Office, for reasons that remain still to be discussed, have not taken up any cases. So we do have a real inability of the justice and police system, and I think what appears to be an absence of courage to really investigate properly. We are entering indeed a new transition period. Yes. I think that transition and maybe 1 year afterwards are windows of opportunities. They are the moment where governments, newly elected governments, can really take courageous steps. So the most important issue that needs to be addressed is one of impunity. I know that the new government has committed itself to decrease the rate of violence, and I think it's a good thing. However, I think we need to insist that security is more than the decrease of daily violence or daily homicide. Security entails trust in the police. Security entails access to justice. Security entails proper investigations. For security to really occur, we need to see actions taken on all those issues. I will certainly invite that government to take the courageous steps that are needed and to take them very quickly. The first one, of course, will be to ensure that the constitutional reform around the federalization of the crimes against journalists, that constitutional reform must lead to secondary legislation, and that should happen before the end of the year. We need to have that well grounded now. 1. 2. The Special Prosecutor's Office that was established to investigate crimes against journalists, independently of the secondary legislation, that special prosecutors must be empowered to investigate the cases that it can investigate. Not every case is the object of difficult legal discussions as to where it falls. There are cases that can be handled by the Special Prosecutor's Office, and it must make it its role, its priority to handle those cases. We need to break the vicious circle. We need to break the cycle of inertia. We need to break the cycle of improper, inadequate, incompetent, and something else investigation. And that needs to be the priority. We need to invite that government within the next 6 months to bring to the public the demonstration that actually investigation is taking place, that the police is doing its role, whether it's a federal or the municipal. There needs to be demonstration, clear demonstration that investigations are happening and that access to justice is going to be a reality, not just a dream. Article 19 doesn't take a political position vis-à-vis a government. We are only going to assess a government on the basis of its ability to deliver human rights protection. Will that government deliver human rights protection? It has made some commitment around that. It has taken some steps, at least with the Transparency Initiative, and we want to invite them to do more than that. We want to invite that new government to be courageous and to take the steps that are needed to tackle what is the main problem in freedom of speech and in human rights generally, which is impunity. That whether or not that government will be able to deliver on that particular front, I don't think I can now tell you yes it will or no it won't. I think that government is coming in the back of a very difficult political period. I think that government will be keen to demonstrate that it is different from the previous government and that it is different from the previous Spring government. To demonstrate that it is different, it needs to deliver on human rights. So it's starting with strong incentives to do that. Whether it will do it, I don't know, but I can assure you that Article 19 will monitor it very, very carefully. Okay. The federalization bill is an important step because I think all the observers, including Article 19 and the government itself, have recognized that at state level, at municipal level, there are real bottlenecks and there are, unwillingness or inability to investigate crimes against journalists. So it's important. The secondary legislation matter because without them, the principle of the constitutional reform will not find a way to be truly implemented, and it will be left too much to the discretion of various actors. So those legislation are important. They are complex. No one is denying it, and they will require tangible commitment to move the file forward. We could be bogged down by details which are important, but they could hamper the progress very easily. We could be here in 2 years from now and those secondary legislation will still not have been adopted because of complex problems. So what is needed is really, in my opinion, a complete political determination on the part of all parties, that they want this file to move forward and that they want this initiative to be completed before the end of the year. I think when there is a will to do so, the law will follow. And we cannot let legal complexities determine whether or not there will be political commitment. That's completely the wrong way. We need to get the political commitment on the table. We need to have all parties affirming their determination to pass the secondary legislation. And we then need to leave the lawyers to do the work so that they can come up with the goods. And I think that is possible if there is a strong political message that the political actors in this country want to see those secondary legislation, good one, adopted before the end of the year. However, I would like to say that from Article 19 standpoint, we are not going to ground our strategy for the protection of journalists on whether or not those legislations will be adopted. As far as we are concerned, there is still a special fiscalia which can take on board cases, which can do some work independently of the special legislation. There are cases that are straightforward, which can be tackled by the Special Prosecutor's Office, and of course the state authorities are still responsible for investigating. So Article 19 is not going to predicate its protection strategy on whether or not these laws are adopted. We are pushing for them. We want them to be adopted because they are the demonstration of a clear political commitment, but I can assure you that we will not be dependent on them to continue to push for strong protection for journalists. The regulation of social media, the regulation of online media has emerged as a global issue. For Article 19, which is an international organization, in fact it's becoming one of the principal issues we are looking into. Globally, governments have moved into a stage of panic a little bit, and certainly a determination to control product content that are multiplying and are outside traditional media. What is happening in Mexico right now around the determination to legislate on online content and social media happens everywhere globally. I mean, it's a multiplication of these laws that we are witnessing at the moment. What Article 19 is arguing very clearly is that online media ought to be regulated, and online content ought to be regulated in the same way that physical material content is regulated, and that there is no need to come up usually with very knee-jerk, reactive proposals in response to a particular incident. That's a very bad way of developing legislation, and we are really warning governments and the international community against it. There are the special rapporteurs on freedom of expression at the United Nations, the special rapporteur on freedom of expression at the Inter-American level. They have both repeated that the regulatory framework for traditional media and for physical content can apply and should apply to online content, and that you do not need special regulation and special laws for that purpose. So yes, to respond to your question, the regulation of social media and online media is a priority for Article 19 globally and in Mexico, and we are working very hard with partners to demonstrate to government that this kind of legislation is not useful, that it is not going to produce better content, that it is not going to allow better monitoring of certain kind of discourse, and that there are other ways of tackling online content.